this week. Probably this.
Good, how are we doing?
No,
Right.
he's not.
I'm just.
He's
afraid
in the
I
very
have to
beginning. He started in cars. That's if anybody gonna be an average to see the water. Nowhere basically they farm. He knows plenty about. Sure. Sure.
Don't worry. Don't worry. Yeah, cool. I'm going out there like. It's fun. It's like. They
Beginning of August, so. Doesn't count me either. Yes, wow. And basically,
Events that they do are fun.
Yeah. So where did it come from?
We're doing a good.
Brody.
Mike, thank you for the roads.
It's
okay.
Yeah, so.
Hello, Jill.
Hi,
How are you?
good, how are you?
I'm so excited to have these folks take their time to share their experience. So we're very appreciative of that as you work through it. We've got a good number of folks on Zoom, 812.
We're at 8.
Right, well,
Yeah. We're getting there.
Glaucoma.
Okay, so I want to introduce our fine panel members. You know, they're just here for the money. Yes, you know, we pay panel members. You need that. So when I called you to volunteer, you said, oh, Bob, I'm really busy. I've got to tell you about the money. You lost on that. Just kidding.
No money?
Oh, come on.
You know why there's no money? This is in control of the budget.
That's right, no money. I got things like quick. Yeah, no money.
So we have Denny Guam, who, in addition to being our OP, you have this other role, don't you?
That's right.
This team that you,
I've been a team, individual maybe 11 years, team 10 years. let's say.
okay, perfect. And so you bring some unique experiences to this whole concept.
That's right.
Okay, good. Right. And we'll see that when we get into the questions. And you know, he's already told me, he says, Bob, I know I'll go off track sometime, but just let me. Don't interrupt me, just let me roll.
The great things come from, right?
That's right. Those ad lib things. Where's Larry? Speaking of ad lib. And we have Lance Taylor, the Lance Taylor team. And we appreciate you being here. So your unique perspective in this is, in addition to the team, were you an individual agent? Did you set up?
Yeah.
What did you do?
I started in Arkansas, so they do things a little differently there. And yeah, and started with Keller Williams in 2004 as an individual agent, and then we moved to Dallas and we started our team in 2018. So we're just over 5 years.
Sure. Yeah. How many do you have on your team now?
We're a team of 15.
Okay. Yeah. And I was just learning something new recently about the degree to which Tiffany, who's kind of got your representative, does a lot of negotiation.
She does, yeah.
Yeah, and which is, I didn't realize that till you said, wow, she does everything.
Mhm. She does everything.
Try not to say that in front of you, because then you say, well, is it a raise in my future here? And then Tisha Silva, who is half of the Silva Shell team. Cindy will, if she schedule works, will be with us next week. So tell us a bit about you and your team and how the two of you got together.
My name's Tisha Civils, and I'm the Shell and Civils team, half of it at least. We are a 2-person team. We have lots of support personnel as needed. So we're a small team. I started as an individual agent here in 2018, and Cindy and I merged our forces in 2020. So it's been gangbusters since. So we're a small team compared to these three. So I have a tiny perspective that I can share with you today.
Which is very important. It's very important for everyone to have that perspective. And then Brad Mattern, and you should know that Brad is here because Jessica generously volunteered him. And he enthusiastically said, Okay, I want to keep this going. So yes, I'm happy to do it. Tell us about your team situation.
So I am on a team, the Mattern team. I don't know if 50-50 counts, but I got a percentage share. With Jessica, I'm also president of the Where's Jessica Committee when I'm left on supervisors. She's on appointments this afternoon, so we check in. But I've been full-time agent since April of 2018. Jessica and I started off, it was just the two of us. And then we steadily grown and now we're up to 8.
Great. Okay, so that gives you a little bit of background of the folks who are going to share their experiences. And each one of these, team and otherwise, will have a unique perspective. And that's important as we look at these concepts, these negotiation concepts. It's important for you to understand everyone is going to do a little different based on who they are. And it's not a right or a wrong, it's a different, which this will allow you to develop your own strategies as you work through it based on what you're learning from them. And one of our goals in every class that we do here is that we all learn something new, including myself, moderator. They will learn. So when they hear some of their colleagues here, wow, Tiffany, make note of that. I hadn't thought about that yet. So work through that. So we'll deal with it. So you should have the set of questions and kind of a little bit of a precursor. And by the way, I want to make sure that everybody is comfortable with these classes. Very user friendly. You need to be very comfortable asking questions as you work through the process, respectful questions, making good comments. Just keep on track with where we are. Because one of the challenges in real estate is if you're not careful, all of a sudden you're talking about your next door neighbor's barber who has a house in Alabama. Well, we can't go there. So we got to kind of stay pretty much with where we are. But feel comfortable, asking questions, going through the process and dealing with that. Because that's, we all want this to be a good learning exercise to work through. So the concept of negotiations for these two specific scenarios. One, when you go out on a listing, it's not an automatic understanding that we're not negotiating yet. We don't have a contract. That's not the only place negotiation takes place. Every negotiation, and we'll see here there are 3 principles involved in it, but every negotiation has things in common that we make use of. When you go out on a listing, I think you would agree that you've got certain objectives. And when you go out and take your time, money and energies over when you go out on a listing presentation, you've got some objectives, you've got some purposes, some things. We'll see how negotiation comes into play. Because what you don't want, in spite of Larry's view on this, Larry Levine, who's got he's really, really good at the idea, but his basic listing is why he's going to which Wednesday negotiate. He said, here's the listing agreement, filled it in. If you just go and sign here, we'll get started.
What's wrong with that?
No, see, it's working really well. So what's the problem? So, but everybody's going to have a little bit of unique. And as we go through this, I want our panel members to also feel comfortable, adding to it and work through the process. So when we look at negotiation, when you go out and listing presentation, you are negotiating with your seller. Guess who else is negotiating? Your seller. Your seller is negotiating with you. Make no mistake, that's exactly what's going on. And so your ability to have, preparation, planning, the purpose, going through it, thinking through it is critical. Because you don't want, in spite of the hard time we give Larry and others, you don't just want a signed listing agreement. This is the basis for a relationship moving forward. You want to make sure it's one that really works for everybody. So the 3 things the 3 principles that are involved in virtually all negotiation is you're going to have the preparation, you can have the planning, you can have the purpose, and you have the actual negotiation itself. We'll have some questions that we'll ask the panel members as they bring their unique perspective into it. And we're doing 2 different things. One, we're looking at negotiation with a seller to obtain a listing. And we'll also, after we do that, look at how we negotiate with a buyer, take a buyer on as a client as we work through it. So any questions so far as I'm getting ready to? Okay. So they've got the questions, you've got the questions here. So at the very beginning, as we negotiate with a seller to pay a listing, the first thing we're going to deal with is preparation. And we've got some questions and deal with the concept of preparation. And this is one of the first things that'll show us how each agent is a little different, even in what they prepare for, what they need. So first question here, and we'll go ahead and we'll start with Devin. What information do you need to be prepared to negotiate with the seller for a listing and a relationship that is satisfactory for all involved? Everybody agree that if you have a satisfactory relationship with that seller, it's going to be a better transaction all the way through. So what's your thought? What kind of information do you need as you're going to negotiate with the seller?
Yeah, I'll break it down in a couple different parts. First, from a very top level, I want what we call on our team the 3 Ws: where, when, and why. Where they're moving to, why they're moving, and when do they need to have that to happen. Right, that turns into a little bit of what we call their motivation, right? So we dig deep on that, 3 deep, just truly understand their current situation. As we all know, most people move for a lifestyle change, either have a baby, empty nester, get a job, lose a job, get a raise, get downsized, whatever it may be. So I truly need to understand that situation. So to go even deeper, I also want to understand their financial picture. And I think that's where some, at least in my experience, some agents start struggling a little bit on talking about what does their financial scorecard look like, so I can make sure and help them make the best decisions. And really dig deep on that. What are you going to use the money for? How much do you owe? Right? What all the moves we need to make? Because and on this note, this is for most people the largest financial decision they're going to make in their life.
Do you find sometimes that when you're talking to sellers, especially about the whole financial end, that many of them haven't thought through that at all?
Most of them have thought through it, but almost all of them are very open to talking about it.
So in negotiation, you're going to help them now think about it,
Yes.
about that information.
Yeah, I need to understand that to help them negotiate or make the best decision for them when we get a buyer.
Okay, from your experience and perspective, Lance, how do you see this first question, preparation?
I think, didn't answer it really well, is that, you have to understand where they're coming from so that you can start framing out your discussion points. Because if you start jumping into, what you think you're in a negotiation, start, aiming in a direction, you're generally going to miss unless you have really good clarity on where that to go. The interesting thing about, negotiating with a seller is they're just about to become your client. So you're facing off, right? And then you become side by side next. So the way you approach it, I think, has to be very, you have to have some nuances and some subtleness on how you're approaching it, but they also need to see you in action. They need to see how you approach your business and your business discussions in general. So I think, the first thing is to get all the information you need. The next piece, you probably need to have all the information about you. So usually it starts with them. And next it's going to go to you, making sure they understand your track record, why they should be talking to you, and understanding maybe some recent successes that you can share. So generally it's going to go into that next before you start having any negotiation or discussions.
What do you think are the most important things about you that you feel like they need to know?
I think your sales record is helpful to have. I think they understand how your decision making is as an agent. What your morals and standards and ethics and that type of thing is, or at least have some viewpoint to that. And then I think they need to understand, while you're talking to them, they're going to get a feel for just who you are as a person and your style. And if that's not a fit, I found it's really difficult to work with. Right? No matter how great you are at negotiation, you're not a great fit for somebody. If you're just too far apart on your ideals and the way you think, it makes it really difficult to be successful together.
We'll see later in some of the other questions, kind of the point that Lance brings up. The reality is sometimes you have to be willing to walk away. It's really not working, and you have to have that ability to do it. You just can't have that mindset that, well, just got to get a sign in the yard in this neighborhood, just got to do it, got to do it, got to do it.
And one more thing I'd add is, the property is really important to your discussion. So, sometimes we come in as an agent, we have a perspective what we think the property is, and we walk in, we go, there's either clutter everywhere, right? Or there is, the house has changed since the MLS photos from 3 years ago, cracks everywhere. You never know what you're walking into fully. So I think it's really helpful to do as much, preparation as you can on what the property condition is and how it's going to look. Because usually that's going to give you a really good angle to start providing solutions right away.
Excellent. Tisha, what's your thought?
Well, building on what they said, everything they've said is completely valid and a huge piece of it. One thing that I do, I'm kind of a real data nerd. So I like to dig into who is this person? what is this house? Let's look at the history. Let's look at the neighborhood. Let's look at the sales. Let's look at the data. I've been known to make charts and graphs and different things like that. But that starts with me figuring out who they are. 98% of Cindy and my business comes from referrals. So we typically know them, or we know their best friend, or we know their mother, or somebody like that. That's typically how we've gotten our business. We don't typically meet strangers. So we dig into their socials, figure out what we have in common, figure out what they do for a living. We looked at LinkedIn because an engineer wants different information than a piano player, you know? So we want to figure out who our audience is so that we know how to present that information. And then, but be really flexible and ready to change that on the fly. Because like you said, you walk in and what you thought this film looked like may not really look like that. But then the motivation again of what they're doing, where they're going, what they're thinking. And I'll be honest, I'm very uncomfortable with the conversations, asking them about their financial status and what they're doing and things like that. That part is, we do it, but it's a difficult conversation to have sometimes.
That's good to know.
Yeah, it is.
Because
You
we
know,
all
and
will
again,
approach that differently.
I'm almost 6 years into this, and so I'm constantly learning something. And so listening to these people starting out day one, I was always taking nuggets, but it was important to hear it over and over again because I'm at a different point in my career, and I know that my challenges and the things I need to learn are different as I grow and as we grow as a team.
And I didn't get comfortable with that until I had to.
Right, exactly.
And I had
that-
to in 2009.
Right,
In 2009, you had to, because people had to come to cash to close.
right.
So I had to ask them, can you get money? Can you borrow money? Do you have credit cards?
Oh,
Right, because it wasn't how much money you're gonna make, it's how
I'm from
much.
2018, so
No,
I.
I know. So I'm saying that wasn't because I was comfortable,
Right,
it's because I had to be to stay in business. Because 25% of our sales in DFW was distressed
you're right.
in 09.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
On the other hand of that, in my investigation of who these people are, I also have this fabulous app called Forewarn. Thanks to Tanisha that she
Yeah,
really
I have
put
too.
this, and I look up everybody, I'm gonna step in their house, honestly, everybody that calls me. Because they can tell you a line, then you look them up and see that they've got a bankruptcy.
Everybody knowledgeable about forewarned.
And all of that. It basically will tell you if they have any bankruptcies, any liens, if they have any criminal things on them.
Assault.
As a parent, this is
You looked at the
important.
panel, right?
Huh? No, I
Yeah.
haven't,
Before you did.
but I would see that.
If you don't have forewarn, it's
Serious
a
book.
tool that you need to
It
have.
is.
Yeah,
It's only about 20 a month. It's not.
I don't even think it's,
No,
yeah, it's maybe 15, 20 bucks a month,
We
but
got a full deal if we
Yeah.
get as many as we could, and I use that religiously,
Yeah.
and it has really helped me on how much effort I'm gonna put forth, because I literally just in the past 6 months had somebody who I saw they had a recent bankruptcy, and I thought, I am not gonna waste a lot of time here, because I know you're gonna have a difficult time. He was self-employed, he was a doctor and had a bankruptcy. And so I knew how I needed to gauge that ahead of time. And it's great for your personal life too, if you have children, or
yeah.
I've had my single friends call me, they look this guy up, you know, I read about that.
Very to show up for security purposes to make sure that you're not just.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
a.
Right.
A big.
If they have a soul on there, I might need them.
Life
Yeah.
360 is another good app
Exactly.
for that as well.
Definitely. Like.
So, yeah, like we said, forewarned,
Forewarned.
you can literally Google them.
Yeah.
And those are very good. Brad, what's your thought?
I mean, for me, I feel like the better I do, the more prepared I am, the better I do. With a listing consultation, it's a consultation, but like what's huge at the beginning is having that initial conversation with them over the phone, so you can get an idea of who they are and how they act and what kind of information you want. Like you said, are you working with an engineer, an accountant, or somebody who doesn't want or doesn't necessarily need the details? Like I've been in listing consultations where they take 2 hours, and I've had others where it's like, all I need is just the numbers. Like you're already hired, all I need is the numbers. But being able to mirror and match, and like kind of going off what Denton said, I want to know what their motivation is. I need to know what their timeline is. I need to know, from a preparation standpoint, like having our listing consultation, like I take this everywhere I go, and I hope you do that. But, having your CMA, having your comps, having your numbers, like the data really helps, but as far as like being one-on-one with in that family's home, I mean, they're inviting you into essentially their castle. Like they're hiring or interviewing somebody to manage, not just an asset, but like that's their home. And so they need to know who is going to be the best person to handle that asset or handle and get them where they need to be as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So, I mean, that's a big responsibility. So I try to take that in wherever I go. And, I've even had with consultations, like I've told the people, like, especially when, you start talking numbers and they get a little defensive. It's like, I'm not here to compete against you, but I'm here to have a consultation. Like, this is what we see with the numbers and the comps and where we feel like where we can have success moving forward. But if you see differently, let's talk about it and let's see what we can do to adjust to that.
It may not be a fit at that time.
No, and I've walked away from listening consultations. I've had one where they said, no, this is what our house is going to go on the market for. And it's like, I can't see it. I can't do it.
Does the group have any questions for our panels on this first question we just talked about in the preparation? Yes, ma'am.
I do have a quick one for Denton. When you're talking to the seller about their financial situation, how do you dive into that?
I think I just asked,
Just,
do you mean,
you just say, because some people are so closed off about that.
How do you tell them it's important enough for them to talk to you about it?
well, when we start talking about the where, when, and why, that goes into the financials, because they, we want to move to Frisco. Okay, what's drawing you there? We want to be in better schools. Awesome. When would you like to be there? Well, before enrollment starts next August. Great. Okay, so do you want to buy the house before you sell this? Well, I don't know. So, well, let's talk to a lender and find out if you financially can afford both. Because if you can, have you ever thought about keeping your primary home as an investment? Well, no, I haven't. Well, let me show you what that looks like. And I show them, every single person I ever talk to, I suggest to them, and this has been a negotiation to keep the home. In my opinion, if you keep your home, I don't think you'd ever sell it. I know that sounds contradictory to what I do, but my goal is to help you build wealth, not necessarily just sell your home. Okay, now we're in financial. Oh,
Gotcha.
right?
That's great.
So now can they afford both? I don't know. Can afford, okay, great. How much equity you can get in your home? Would you like to lose all that money towards the next home? Because I've got a lender that will let you do 5% down, mid 5%, no mortgage insurance up to 1.5 million. Right? So you only have to put $45,000 down on a $1.5 million home. We can take the other 200,000 you make and buy an investment property. Or you can pay off some debt. You said you had some debt. So I don't think I don't make it a bigger deal than it is, but it is a necessary step to make the move. And I feel like if you don't talk about it, then you're going to the doctor and only telling him one symptom, but not really telling him everything that's going on with you. And then the doctor can't really diagnose what's wrong with you. And then something bad happens and he goes, well, yeah, I was kind of feeling that way before. It's like, well, you should have told me that, because now when you put these two diagnoses together, it opens up a whole nother array of options for us. And that's what I want to do for the clients. And if they're closed off, they're closed off. It's fine. I mean, I don't need them to tell me everything,
By the way, even as effective as he is, you will never know everything.
That's right. I mean,
You'll never have everything. You're always taking that information, making a guess about what the rest of it is. Hopefully, your experience will make you right. So let's go to the second. Oh, yes, ma'am.
So
Question.
with that, then, are you also taking like a quick CMA for the leases so that you can show them?
sure. And a hold worksheet. Yeah. Absolutely.
We say we've read for the second question. We've kind of touched on this a little bit. Does the information needed in your preparation vary depending on the relationship with the seller, such as friend, referral, prior relationship? Right?
I try to go in, and being the most prepared that I can be as far as having data, comps, the information in our listing consultation, like who we are and what our successes have been and all that. But I think it goes back to mirror and matching. Like I said, I've had consultations that take 20, 30 minutes. And I've had some where they want to sit there for 2 hours and talk about everything. So I try to go in as if everybody's the same, whether I've had a relationship with them or not, or if it's somebody new. Most of the people that we've worked with have been referrals or, from our sphere, which is nice. So that there's already that relationship there.
But you don't presume that's going to give you an automatic.
No,
No,
not at
the
all.
process of.
No, I go in like, you know, I'm interviewing for the job, like I still have to, I guess, win this, but you know, earn their trust to, you know, hire us right away.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Same thing. I typically have my entire presentation. I don't care if they're a friend and I've known them for 20 years. I want them to see that other side. You know, I want them to know that I'm not just, you know, the PTA mom that you met. I also am a professional and here is my information. And so you can look at my stats or my actual presentation. I'm not going to read it to them unless they're the type of people that want to go by and look through every single page. And then that kind of leads our presentation. But most people I find don't really want to. The conversations go very organically and you're able to cover those topics. But most definitely, I'm always bringing a full presentation. I always bring examples of my marketing materials and things like that, so they can see, because eventually this will get to the money question. And I want them to see that I spend money when I list your home. And if my brochures or papers like this, I don't think I can justify, you know, wanting to negotiate with my money. So I try to bring that all out right from the beginning.
Lance?
I mean, I think your information that you share varies depending on the person themselves, like their personality, more so than the relationship. You know, relationships move at the speed of trust. If you have high trust with someone, they're going to kind of, you know, they're going to follow your direction a little quicker. Or you're going to get into like the meat of the conversation a lot quicker. And I bring my laptop to every presentation because I don't, you know, you come pre-prepared with what you know to come pre-prepared with, and that's already, but I can pull up anything at just a moment's notice. And so, you know, again, we have this conversation where it shifts to a lease, right? I just pull the lease contract in. So the quicker you are with your tools in your MLS and having all that available, then you're really prepared to have any conversation that you need to have and validate that with data.
Perfect. Didn't?
I would say everything they're doing, I mean, you can have about 75% of everything you need to bring to every listing point ready to go, like they say.
Yeah.
The other 25% you can manipulate depending on the client's needs or if you understand their situation. I think a couple of things that I want y'all to take away here is one, I like asking it's a technique, a negotiation technique called isolation. And so I start out, even when the guys shadow me, other than price, Bob, what is the most important thing you discuss today before you hire me as your agent?
Do I like you?
Yeah, well, if you like me, yes. If it's personality, it's only problem signing it, then let's talk. Right, so other than price, is there anything else? What's the most important thing to discuss before you hire me as your agent? Because I want to know, my biggest problem personally for me is I'm a very impatient person. And my goal is to get in and out of there as fast as possible, but I know that's me.
Sure.
Right, and I had to pull that back because some people want to sit and chat. And if they do, then I have to do that. And that's just being honest, right?
Right.
So I like asking that question. And as they said, be fully prepared to when he says, well, I really want to understand your marketing. Awesome. Let's go through what we do to get your home sold marketing wise. And then I'll go back, all right, other than the marketing, do you feel comfortable with that? Okay, other than finally discussing price or any reason why you wouldn't hire me today. Right? Well, what do you need to do to get my home ready? Okay, well, let's walk through the home and we'll talk about getting your home ready.
So one of the things he's done is he jumped forward to another question that talks about what are your favorite closing statements? What are your closing?
Sure,
statements?
but it all goes together. That's why we have to jump around. It all goes together. So what you're seeing from everybody is they've already pre-planned and that's how you move and start, you negotiate, right? I haven't figured out how to negotiate my 6 and 3-year-olds, but I can do it with the seller, right?
The hardest people in the world to negotiate with are teenagers. Because their favorite phrase is whatever, whatever. That's where you go with that.
Well, part of negotiation is asking, you know, the big piece of this is asking the right questions and controlling the conversation. Right, ask the right questions and control the conversations.
So one of the things we're getting from all four of these, the preparation stage and the manner of preparation, they're all very, you know, detailed and significant in their preparation. It's a little bit to the third question. And it's how do you think the degree to which you're well prepared will affect the negotiation? You've talked about how far you go, we could think. So Denton,
Yeah.
how do you think it's affect your negotiation?
Well, I think most people are always scared of the unknown. So if you've answered all their, what we call today in this world, objections, On my team, we call it problems. You have to find out what their problems are. Like, what is the reason why they're not hiring us? What is the reason why they're not hiring an agent if it's for the owner? What is the reason why they're interviewing other people? So find out what the problem is. What is the problem that we can solve? And the more prepared you are to solve that problem, as we all are on here, the better chance you have of negotiating or converting the deal, in my opinion. Right? So if I know that they're short on money, then we have solutions like bridge loans or Homeward or whatever it is to solve that problem. Because we all know it every day because we talk about it. But when you meet somebody that is not talking to a realtor, not in business, they're like, oh, wait a minute, somebody will buy my home all cash for me? Or yeah, we can do that. Right. So that to me is how you use the information if you understand truly their situation.
That comes from better prepared.
As they all said, research and development, research.
Lance?
I mean, I think it's really well presented by Vinton. I don't think I have anything to add. I mean, you know, obviously, the more experience you have, the easier it is to negotiate too, because, you know, again, you come across these different programs and solutions for all the challenges.
Yeah.
And, you know.
And you're very confident.
Yeah, exactly. And you kind of know the parameters. So I think the longer you're in the business, that gives you a big advantage because you just come across more solutions. The preparation time, as you become an agent longer and longer, is less and less. That's the reality of it, because you're doing things very, very similar, and yet you're still putting them first, right? So that you understand what their true needs are. And you have this arsenal of solutions, and you're not pulling them out until you detect the need. And so you're very precise in the solutions that you're presenting.
That's where your preparation for that negotiation.
That's right.
Yeah.
I don't know that I can really add much. It does kind of take me back to being a newer agent when I was newer, because I could defeat myself before I got to the appointment, because I'm thinking Denton's walking in there. How am I ever going to win this against Denton? And so I found preparation definitely gave me confidence to be prepared. But I also kind of opened myself up and told them, I may not have all of your answers right now, but please understand that I'm eager, I'm willing to figure out the answers. And I'm part of an amazing office where I've got plenty of people willing to share their knowledge, help me every step of the way, and we will get this done for you. So that was a huge obstacle for me to overcome, and then feel like I had the ability to win it, and I have.
But you were able to overcome.
Absolutely,
Perfect.
absolutely.
Right?
I don't know if I can really add anything else that already hasn't been said, but I mean, as far as the more prepared you are, or I guess the more you practice, the more confidence you have, and you can kind of like Bob and weave or adjust, you know, as I don't want to say objections, but as like the seller's questions, a different question comes up, well, you know how to do it. Or if a different need comes up, kind of like what Den said earlier, like when they're trying to self-diagnose or let you know like what the issues are or where they need to be and how they need to get there, you know. The more practice and more prepared you are, the more you'll know like how to adjust and help them get where they want to be. So I learned something on every consultation I do, because everybody's different. Everybody's needs are different. So you learn to adjust accordingly, and ultimately you got to figure out what's best for them and how you can help them the best.
So they obviously are very good with preparation, a little different, but pretty common elements in all of them. So question 4 gets a little bit into how we make use of the preparation to move to the stages of planning and the purpose. So when you do all this preparation, how's this going to affect your ability to have a clear and specific purpose, which you're going to need to have? And part of your planning is you're going to plan towards that. So all this preparation, sorry. Brad, how do you pull from that to have your clear, specific purpose of what that listing presentation, what that relationship, what all that's going to be based on what you've learned in your preparation?
Keep going back to confidence, or just finding out what the motivation is of the seller or the people that need to sell their home, and matching it to figure out what's the best way that you can help them accomplish their goals.
Issue.
I mean, I think if you're not prepared, that's going to show. People are going to know that you're winging it. So I just think it's the number one thing that you can do. It can overcome so many obstacles if you just dig in, figure it out, and ask all the right questions.
Lance?
So I think the hardest listing presentations do when you have somebody who's a stonewaller. You know, where they just won't speak, they don't give you any affect, they don't give you anything, they're just looking at you. And so you need to have your presentation set so you can go from A to B, you know, as quickly as you need to, right? And you have a string that you know is going along. I actually prefer it to be derailed and build a relationship and all that. It's a whole lot more enjoyable. So I think, you know, when your preparation is clear, when you know exactly how to get from point A to B without any distractions, that's good, right? You need to be able to do that, but then you also need to have this, like we said, this, you know, arsenal of preparation for anything that could possibly come up and have a direction to go. You don't maybe have to have exactly point by point, exactly, you're gonna hear that, but at least a direction to go. So they feel confident in your approach, but what you guys said, I think it's all about confidence.
And you're making judgment calls when they're stonewalling, you're talking your obstacles about, you're making judgment calls on how important that is to be able to move forward. Because the guy stonewalling may say, why are you still talking? I'm ready to sign.
Correct. Yeah.
Be able to pick up that.
Yeah. So voices going in your head is typically the problem, right? Or assumptions that we make are typically the problem.
Yeah,
Yeah.
then,
So just to be clear, the question is, what is your ultimate negotiation strategy to bring your seller to position to list with you? Is that the question we're on?
well, number 4,
Oh, we're still.
we're still on the.
Still 4. Okay, I jumped ahead. Well, then I really don't. Just saw some of the reality come out. Yeah, I'm already reading ahead. I would say I'd agree with them. I always joke on my team because I'm a big dork with Marvel and DC. That if you ever watch Nighthawk and Marvel, does everybody know who that is in the Marvel universe? No matter what happens, that second he pulls the bow and arrow out that he needs. It's a grappling hook, it's a bomb, it's sticky putty, whatever. Well, that's ultimately as you grow and you learn, that's what you're gonna be. And it's gonna look like, man, they know everything. Well, no, I've just done this so many times. Now, next time you say this objection or this concern, you just spit it out. And that's what happens over time.
Okay. Question, Laura, did you have a question? We good?
No, I was just clapping for the Marvel superhero reference.
You're welcome.
Okay, cool. Any questions here before we move over to the planning stage? Anything, we good? Okay, so, we start off with preparation, which they all obviously are really good at that, and they each have it. Everybody pick up that they have common elements, they also have a unique way of doing it. Each one of them is doing it a little differently, as you will do it a little different, but you all will have that same goal of having enough preparation to take you to the next stages of planning and then the purpose and then the active negotiation. So in the planning, first question we have is how do you use the information in the preparation phase, all the stuff you've just gathered, to plan a negotiating strategy that fits within the purpose of the negotiation? Because you're going to go to in the next section, actual purpose you're going to set up. How do you take all this information you gathered in preparation? Now you're going to plan strategy, like when Brad talks about what he's doing with his presentation, all that thing, that's a plan. He's got a plan though on how he goes through that process. So how do you use all the information that you've just gathered in preparation and use that to plan a negotiating strategy that fits within your purpose? Brad, go ahead.
Well, when we're in the consultation, after we sit down at the table, get a tour of the house and all that. One of the first icebreaker questions I like to ask is like, wave a magic wand, what's the perfect situation? Or what's the perfect scenario moving forward? And that way you kind of get a better idea of what their motivation is. But also for me, I'm taking cues from that and I'm thinking like, okay, how am I going to start this? Or what's more important to them? Like, is the marketing more important to them? Or do they just want to talk about numbers? Or, or do they want to know a little bit more about me? A lot of times, I agree with what you said, Lance, is that I don't mind just having a conversation, whether it's about sports or golf or, just in general, and then, just kind of bring it all back to real estate somehow. But that's what I want to know at the very beginning is, ask them what their perfect scenario is. And then that's where I get it going from there.
That helps you develop this negotiating strategy.
Yeah, and it just kind of, I don't want to say like loosens the tension, but it's kind of an icebreaker. It just, because it gets the seller and the client thinking, okay, they're curious about like what I actually think, or what's best for me. Like they want to know what I think is a dream scenario. Then we can go from there.
Perfect. Tisha?
Very similarly, I guess not the magic one, but I like that statement. That's a really good statement. We typically will look at the house first and kind of talk through everything. And typically I can bring in my knowledge of other homes in the area or the neighborhood. And that typically will spur off what our continuing conversations are going to be. Once we do sit down at the table, they're ready with their questions. A lot of times they definitely don't want me to start a spiel. They have questions that they want to ask me majority of the time, I find. And so that really kind of sets the pace for where we're gonna go. I let them guide a lot of times. So Denton, I'm not as good as you at controlling. Eventually I get there for sure, but they're generally very excited to ask their questions, see where you're gonna go with that. And then I can generally circle around and get to all the other things.
Lance?
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. People generally want to know that you care before they care what you have to say. And so our first, when I first meet somebody, I usually put my things down. We walk the home together, and I do that specifically because I understand them better as a person. They understand me better as a person. So when we sit down to have the harder discussions, potentially, right? We already have a working knowledge of how we operate, who we are, right, as a person. So if I find if I walk, sit down, there's a lot more tenseness on their side because they don't know how you're going to play it. They don't know, how this is.
We're kind of waiting for that sales pitch. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, and so I think, the more you can build that relationship, I mean, consider the fact that a lot of times we go on listing appointments, we don't know the folks, right? We've never met them before. I know only, a little bit about their property and maybe a little bit about them that I've done research on, that's it. So, building that kind of rapport first makes this whole negotiation piece so much easier. And so that's our strategy, is just to kind of get a comfort level with them. And, we're not even talking necessarily, we're talking about the house, we're flattering them on their home and the things that they've done that truly look good. We're getting to know who their families, you're seeing family photos as you walk around, you're understanding what makes them tick and drives them. And that really is going to help that negotiation, that discussion together.
Good, yeah, I would say, in this planning phase, you have all the information, be ready to help solve their problems. So brush up on any maybe solution you need to provide to them based on their situation, whether any of the multiple different scenarios we have for them. And then like Alden said, once you start talking to them, building rapport, just be ready to pivot. Because there's a lot of times new information will come up at the meeting that didn't come up over the phone, depending if you did like a call, a pre-call. So just be ready to pivot at that point when you start building rapport. They may bring something else up that they bring up first time.
Okay. So, because we hear all about a lot of this, the planning and the preparation strategies and so forth. What kind of flexibility do you have as you gain new information? Because you'll only, as much research as you do, you'll only know so many things until you actually start. So within your plan to develop a strategy, what kind of flexibility do you have moving forward? And
When you say flexibility, do you mean whether I will take the listing or not?
well, that's part of it, but the terms under which you'll take the listing. Which may be from the standpoint of how reasonable and unreasonable they are, and the price and staging and condition. How sensitive are they about the condition of their property? They live there, they love it.
Sure.
Why doesn't everybody else love it?
I think for me specifically, when it comes to flexibility, I'm very stern when it comes to commission. I don't really flex much there. Right, so if they're wanting, and at one store, there's all these people, if you buy with us, we'll sell your home for free. And this is a client that that I knew through a mutual friend, and I said, you know what, I'll do all this, but if that's what's best for you and your family, that's not what I'm willing to do. So go with that family, good luck with everything. And I said something like, if they're gonna negotiate their money away, what do you think they're gonna do with yours? Right, something like that. So I walked out and they came walking out of the house, they knocked on us and said, no, we want to go with you, we like everything you did. So I'm pretty stern on that. I'm not gonna do like one. Now, when it comes to price, I will say I'm a little bit more liberal on that. I will list a home that's, I believe, is overpriced. Because I know that over time I can get them to come to reality of what the price
But
is.
the market data.
What the market,
teach them.
yeah, the market data, they don't believe it. I get it, but my friend sold for 600. I know that was last year though, a couple months ago. But I get it. You got to try, right? Give the old college try.
Yeah.
Well, how do you not know if we don't put it? You're right. And I'll say something, negotiation wise, how long would you be willing to be the highest bidder on your home? What do you mean? Well, at 600, At what point in time will you believe it's not worth it if you don't get an offer? Week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? They'll usually say like a month. Great. So in a month, would you be willing to visit my price? Sure, great. And then what happens in 15 days? Like, okay, let's talk more about the price.
And so you not only are being flexible in what you're doing as you gain new information, so are they.
Yeah. And condition, which is the other piece, I am very similar when it comes to price on flexibility there too.
How important is the condition of the property as you market it? What's your thought?
It's only as important as in relation to the price.
Or relation to the other options available.
Correct. Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right.
So if everybody here would buy a home in Highland Park, that's condemned for 200,000. They don't, you don't have to look at it.
That's true. Right.
Exactly. Thank you. About 500. The land alone is worth a million. So it's a relationship between price and condition, as we all know.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, yeah, please.
So in this situation. So I have a seller who is, we went at the listing that very way. We want to overprice it. Okay, but this is where the comps are in this price range. Okay, but we want to price it up here. Okay, if you understand that, you know, we're not, if we don't have any showings in the first 2 to 3 weeks, you know, we need to revisit this.
That's right.
That happened. We have an offer on the table for, honestly, the price range I said. And they've only come down now 15,000 and nowhere close to
Okay.
the offer. So how?
I don't want to take up the panel because this, I want everybody, but here it is. In short, you
Yeah,
have to understand why they're moving.
It's a question of motivation, yeah.
it's an
And
estate.
go back to that and say, what is you using the money for? What are you using the money for? Sure, of course. There's always emotion.
Okay.
Right?
Estate sale,
And I'll give you an example.
and I have all the time in the world to sell
Of
it.
course they do. Now, and again, you can play the math problem, great. That extra 50,000 you're waiting for, how much money is that losing in equity if you don't have it and reinvest in something else right now? Because based on inflation, it's losing 9% every day, because it's sitting in the house and not in a new vehicle or another investment, right? Okay, so you can play that game more. The emotional game, but Tony DeCello, my coach, had me do one time when he wanted to get his kids to a new school, but he was holding out over $10,000. And this is an 06, he goes, go ahead, call your client, I said, okay, he goes, ask him what's more important, your kid's education or the $10,000. Said, are you sure? I said, yes. So I asked him, he didn't really take that very well, but then he called me back and said, accept the deal, you're right, that we need to get to the school.
So this is a good example of new information that a seller's getting because you're going through this process. You're asking those questions. You're going through it. It may be that he's just not ready yet. I mean, maybe-
And I want them,
and that's
I mean,
the
that's what I would do,
motivation.
is drive them back to the, that's why you have to have the word, why are they using the money? What's the goal of the money? Right? And that's what you, of course,
Right.
of course.
The seller who tells you, I want to get unreasonably rich, I'm in no hurry. Can you help me? I mean, you know, the reality is, unless you feel like you need practice putting your sign in the yard, you don't. You need practice going to closings. And so, you know, you see to make a decision. So talk to us about your flexibility, right?
Yeah. I mean, so I think I have a lot of flexibility. I'm a great person anyway. You know, there's not in morals and ethics,
Would
but
you
I'm
say great or great?
great.
Great.
You know, there's white and black, right? And I always live somewhere in the middle, right, on just about any conversation when it comes to things other than morals and ethics, right? That tends to be very black and white. So I expect the plan to deviate every time I walk in. And it really depends on so many different factors that you can't really predict in advance. So preparation is super important, but at the end of the day, you have to prepare very well and then have tremendous flexibility because you have personalities, you have property conditions, you have people's parents talking in their ears or friends or, you know, a realtor in another state or whatever it is, right?
The Uncle Charlie factor.
That's it. And so how much they value what you're sharing and how much they value what they think, right? There's always this bridge and you're having to kind of come to, you know, some type of consensus. And typically in a relatively short period of time. So I think there's a lot of flexibility. And we were having this discussion about, you know, price alone and how people see their property. You know, and so the best thing you can do is try to put them in a position as a buyer, right, in those circumstances. The one thing I do often actually is I take quick pictures of their home when I walk in, and I get it, just, you know, sometimes when I walk in the home, just a couple quick snapshots. So when we're looking at comparables, then we can go to this conversation, would you buy this house or would you buy this house? Your house, right? And you have photos you can put right next to your screen, and you can simulate a scenario where they go, I see what you mean. I understand where you're coming from, right? If they're being honest with themselves. So you have to be flexible depending on how stubborn some sellers are, right? Of how you approach that information without offending them. And that's where the line comes, gets a little bit, you know, challenging.
Agreed with everything they're saying. The only different technique I have used before is I printed out pictures of like the house that sold for the most in their neighborhood and that house that sold for the least. And didn't tell them the prices and said, which one do you think yours is the closest to it? And that had really, really helped me be able to get them to see a little bit more reality. But at the end of the day, some people are just super hard-headed about it. I thankfully have never had anybody try to be too ridiculous about it. I honestly don't know how flexible I could be if it was, if it was $80,000 more than what the comps are showing. To me, that's a futile effort on my part in a lot of ways. But that depends on the person, it definitely depends upon the person. So I am very flexible, $10,000 or $15,000, depending on the price point. Sure, that's fine. And we do discuss, this is really where I think we're going to end up. I'm more than happy to try this for you, but we need to have a plan that if this doesn't work, I need to know you're comfortable, making those adjustments as we need those to happen, because the longer this property is on the market, the more stigmatized it becomes, people start asking questions. So.
Yeah, what's wrong with the house?
Right, right. And so, in the recent market, sitting on for a month, people are asking questions, I mean, now we've got a little bit more flexibility, but again, that's pocket to pocket, neighborhood to neighborhood. So it is important to get them to at least listen to you in that realm, for sure.
Question?
So I've had an incident or a situation, whatever, where I had all the comps, I had all the chart masters, I had everything that said, this is where your numbers should be.
Yeah.
Seller says, absolutely not, this is where I want to be. So I didn't take the listing. Sure enough, that son of a gun sold it well above where I had placed it. Now,
Scarcity of inventory to make
and
that
now, but it wasn't even that, because in that area, there was actually stuff to choose from. It was just like,
Just a fluke.
oh, now my whole church knows because he's selling the whole church. That's where I get the majority of my referrals. So, I mean, does that happen? Do you guys ever go back and look at the ones you didn't take and see?
This is why Denton takes overpriced listings sometimes. Because he's seen themselves from other agents that drop the price after he gave them the right price. So I think the longer you're in the business, you see these trends and you go, I get it. Okay, they're gonna price it high and then they're gonna drop it down, they're gonna get the sale. So that's why sometimes that's the flexibility that you gotta have.
Now, what's the negotiation
Yeah,
I have to have? I have to be ready for whenever another agent pulls my numbers and says, it takes a little bit longer to sell homes. Well, that's because of X.
yeah, sure.
That does counter my.
So why does one house sell higher price than a comparable house lower price? And let's just keep it even, Steven, that these two properties. And there's one thing that's always different about two houses. Okay, one's facing north, the other's facing south, the other, if one's right next to the Walmart, one, there's always a location difference. But we'll have houses that will sell because every house in this location is unique. You walk into a house, there's a different feel, there's a different smell. I mean, one house is just perfect for this couple. Feels, and the reality is they may pay more for that. And there's a house right across the street, same floor plan, same everything, and maybe even better condition, they won't buy. And that's a human nature factor of real estate. It's an important thing. So Brad, tell us about your flexibility.
I mean, we're flexible to an extent. Where we're flexible the most would be the plan, or making sure that there is a plan for every question or objection. Like if we're talking about price, I had this conversation like 2 weeks ago. It's like, well, we want to list it right here. I'm like, okay, we can do that. Data says this, chart masters, our comps Because after going through a CMA, you know, you have all the adjustments and everything, okay, based on the information that we talked about, where would you list your house? And so then we look at like the days on market and that information. So we can start somewhere, but I want to let them know, like, if we have a bunch of showings and no offers, or, you know, or we're just not getting where we need to be with it. I don't want to wait till day 14. I want to start having a conversation of like day 9 and day 10, so we can start planning for this. Like, if we don't have this, what's our reaction? Because we don't want to be on the market. If you need to be up in Frisco or Prosper by this date, the clock's thinking we need to go. So really for us, it's just, we'll try what the seller wants to do. If the data and the market suggests that we can that we can do that. But at the same time, I've had I've had one listing in particular in Allen where all the comps said 550, 560, and he said, no, it's got a list for like 625. And Jessica and I were both in there. It's like, we're not the realtors for you. I just don't see it. And there's just nothing that.
And sometimes they'll eventually come back to you.
Right.
After it doesn't sell.
So I mean, at the end, I mean, we have what we call our pledge to you as a client, and one of the pledges is that, you know, we want to be as transparent as we can be. We want to tell you what you need to hear, not necessarily what you want to hear, because sometimes sellers and or buyers can be their own worst enemies. So like, I'm not here to compete against you. I'm here to consult with you. Let's put a plan together for, you know, what the price is, what the marketing strategy is to get you where you need to be next, because that's what you said is motivating you for why we're having this meeting right now.
Somebody on Zoom have a question? Saw the chat pop up real quick.
You want to Zoom with a question? You may want to Zoom with an answer. We're flexible. Okay, so now we're going to move to purpose. Every negotiation has a purpose, known or unknown. It always has a purpose. The negotiation that appears to be almost impossible is one in which either party sees no benefit to the negotiation process. The seller make me unreasonably rich. I don't need to sell, whatever. There's no motivation. You can negotiate with someone who's got a gun to your head. You cannot negotiate with somebody who doesn't care. Because after there, if they don't care, no negotiation can happen as you work through. So when we look at a purpose and we've gone through the preparation, doing the planning, we move to a purpose, take us to the actual strategy. And we'll go ahead and say with Brad and move down. So you've gained information preparation. You now have a clear, specific goal on your desired result for the presentation. You know, you've got a specific, and I presume it's got to be more than sign here. I mean, there's something you're establishing a relationship using the listing presentation as a basis for all that moves forward. So are you able to, with your preparation and your planning, able to develop a clear, specific purpose?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, it goes through, you know, however you design your consultation or have however you build the relationship. And then, you know, at the end, when you talk about all the information, it says, do you guys have any other questions? Or is there anything else that we need to cover? Say no, it's like, are you ready to hire us today? You know, let's get this process going. We can get sign consultant or like stager in here and get a photographer. You know, we can, you know, that would be the point where I started bringing out the calendars and we say, okay, here's where we are today. If you say we need to be, or that you need to have, you know, closing on this day, like this is what we need to do, like 6, 7, 8 weeks from now, and then start putting that process into place and get.
Yes, sir.
Same. But one of the goals I really care about is once we've done this transaction, it's great that I've made a sale, but I want you to feel like I did a good job. I want you to feel like we did everything we could to make this process as painless as possible for you. And so I want to make sure that we've covered all of that in this presentation. And so,
Can you do something to make it easy for them to review and say good things about you?
absolutely. Upon closing, we send Zillow feedback. I've done it several different ways. We've done it in the past where we actually included one where they could fill it out at the table, at the closing table. I got that information from a really great agent one time. And I see different successes. The digital seems to work a little bit better. But I really want to know that I've done a good job for this person, because that's the way you get referrals. I try not to make money be the motivation for me personally, because that doesn't really necessarily motivate me. I think it does my husband, so he wants me to keep doing this. But I want to know that I served somebody well, and that you moved to the place you wanted to be, and that your family, ended up, we did what your motivation was. And we did it in a good way. And the majority of the time it's happened. It didn't happen one time. And I'll tell you, it crushed me forever. It did. But it was during that whole COVID crunch, and they felt like, I don't have any choices. I got to take this house. And they hated the house. They're still there today. But I mean, it took me forever to get over that.
They don't hate that
Yeah.
appreciation of that.
No. That's the difference of, I am an emotional person, and I have to pull up my business mind many times and put my emotions in my backpack, and that's not always easy.
So think about the specific goal that Tisha's talking about, that she's gained through her preparation. She's getting this information in preparation, she's doing that planning for a strategy to end up with. She doesn't just want a transaction. What does she really want? What's her specific goal at the end here? Relationship. She wants them to feel good about her.
It's a talking referral engine for you out there.
It's about me.
Referral.
Good about the job that I did for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the numbers will take care of themselves.
Yeah.
If they're pleased with what I've done.
Brad?
Well, and one of the things that we always tell our people is like, I don't want to be your realtor for today. I want to be your realtor forever.
Right.
So, I mean, we have 10 pledges that we have, and at the end, it's like, if I'm knocking out 1 through 10 at a minimum, I should be able to provide you 100% satisfaction and service. Where whenever you have a real estate need, or you know somebody that has a real estate need, that Mattern team is top of mind. And the greatest compliment we could ever get is a referral that you put your name on the line to have us talk to them.
So that really makes this clear, specific goal really nice and tight. I said, I just don't want to say, I want this. And part of that is pure human nature. We all want to be liked. Now, one of the things, and you only have one,
Right.
but many, as you do this longer and longer, you're going to have transactions in which you're not going to make the people happy. They're not going to be happy with you. They never will be, but they're that kind of people. That's the way they are. And your benefit from this thing you walk away with, thank goodness I don't live in their world, because that's the way they are with everything.
Right.
And at some point in time, that's a defense mechanism that you'll pick up. So, Lance?
I think it's said really well. I don't think I have anything to add there.
Everything is good. Didn't agree. Okay? Yep. Okay, perfect. Now, one of the things that you're doing, one of the purposes of you doing is you set up these specific goals. This is going to actually help you plan your negotiation. So as you're doing the preparations, you're going through the negotiation for that listing. This specific goal that you've set up is going to guide you in everything you do from that point forward. And we're going to see later when you look for little red flags, look for things that help you decide, maybe I'll never get there from that. We sometimes almost feel like we need to ask questions we can't ask, cannot ask, on emphasize, we cannot ask. Are you on medication?
Are you?
I made that statement down in Austin. I was at a meeting and there were a whole bunch of Texas Railroad attorneys. And I said, we train our people because it's such a hassle dealing with these people are crazy. And I said, we always ask them, I'm that issue like bullshit. You can't do that. I was pull their chain a little bit. But the reality is, well, you can't do that. You've always got to be looking for the signs. And one of the signs is when you get the call at 10 o'clock at night. And they're just ballistic or whatever. So,
Don't you feel like you gotta ask that question? You already know the
you almost
answer.
do. Yeah, you almost do have to go through and ask that. Now, all these things that we're talking about, let's flip over to the seller side. And let's look at from the sellers that this goal you've set up as you're going through the process, you want them to like you. How do you take into account the seller's goal in this? Because their goal, they probably don't start off saying, I want to work with a realtor that I really love for life.
Right.
So
Well, I mean, ultimately, they want to sell their home quickly and they want to sell it for the most money. So I have to have, my ducks in a row. I have to have my plan together and I have to execute it efficiently and do what I say I'm gonna do.
okay, you just made a statement and I want a clarification.
Yes, sir.
That a seller, you almost said, the
Uh-huh.
seller always wants to sell it as quick as possible for the most money.
Okay. True enough. There are those that don't want to sell it quickly. They want to take their time and they want the most money and they don't care how long it takes.
Maybe there's something else other than money.
Right.
Is there? Can you be? Can
Well,
you
I
for a
guess there
seller?
can be, but I
Can there
haven't
be?
met them yet.
In divorce situations,
Oh,
sometimes they want
gosh.
to get away from their spouse and disconnect their name from the home. And
Yeah.
so
So there are other
there's different
sometimes
motivations.
True.
scenarios, yeah. And we're open to that. So when we're going through the process, we need to recognize as the seller's negotiating with us, the seller's got these goals.
Right.
And the goals typically, while they want to work with someone they feel good about and confident and so forth, their goal is not to make you happy. That's kind of a byproduct.
Right.
You need to make it easy for them to make you happy. It works through that. So you got to take into consideration their goals, don't you? As you work through that. Any thoughts on that, Den?
I think everybody already does this in your value proposition, you make them understand your negotiation. That you're leveraging.
Your what?
Leverage in their life because they have life going on, but maybe it's
Right.
divorce, maybe they're losing job, maybe they're empty nesters, but one of the reasons why you're gonna help them with their goal is they're going to leverage it out to you. And they have to
Yeah.
believe that you can sell their home, of course, and then solve any problems that arise.
We sometimes call this the hassle factor.
Easy,
But
buddy.
people don't want the hassle.
Easy,
They do want it to be easy. And they want you to take care of everything for them.
Same reason why most people don't wash their own car, do their own lawn, clean their own house. Same kind of concept.
Okay, perfect. Now, all of these things will lead us to our actual negotiating strategy. And we've got a question and we've got some sub questions. And when we're talking about your ultimate negotiating strategy to bring the seller to a position and to list the property, because that's, although there are a lot of parameters and a lot of hairs on this dog, the reality is you want them to list with you in a satisfactory manner. So that's going to be your ultimate strategy. So first, and we're going to start with you, Denton.
Okay.
Do you have an effective closing statement, where the statement that will get them to say, sign here? Do you have something that you really good about that you use?
I mean, when we finish the presentation, it's all right, let's put me to work for you. All we have is some paperwork to sign and go over. It's pretty straightforward. And then that's when an objection comes up. And then it's okay, then I handle objection, and then it's okay, other than that, is there anything else that you're concerned about?
See, he likes to continue going with, okay, is there anything else? Is there anything?
I'm gonna go towards my personality, to go towards the problems. Than to let them sit and think about it.
And we recognize part of this.
Part of that's because I left
Part of
this
this
presentation, then call them back and they go to somebody else.
Yeah, part of this is Denton and his personality.
Right,
And his, everybody would do
but
it.
just be fair, I wasn't always that way. It was just,
He used to be a nice guy.
yes,
Way back when. Remember?
more timid and nicer.
John does hurt you though over time.
Yeah, I mean, times have I left a listening presentation, my earlier word, they signed somebody else. And I just wasn't willing to ask the question of why.
Lance, you have an effective favorite closing technique, closing
I
statement?
mean, typically, it has to do with timeframes. So, ideally what day works best for you to set up, to have photos, we usually get staging in before that. So we'll talk about staging our photos.
Assumptive close.
Yeah, it's a more of an assumptive close. And then usually, like you said, as soon as you start asking questions like that, if there's an objection left, it will force it.
That's right.
Because they already know you're down to business at that point.
And I know everybody on here already assumes the close. They're already like, they're picking me.
Yeah.
Right,
Well, yeah.
So let's go and get the sign.
Sure.
I mean, I think that's the close, is the
Right.
mental
right.
close of you're choosing me.
But some of the nicest people in the world who are realtors who don't get a lot of listings, who have a lot of buyer clients, they're too nice to ask the question.
Right.
They just want people to like them. They won't take that next step, which is a risk. Oh, well, if I ask something hard, they're not gonna like me.
I want to always use this question earlier in the listing presentation. If I know I'm up against other agents too, I'll ask what specifically are you looking for in an agent to represent you? Or what's the most important quality in the agent to represent you? And so what you're already starting to do is align yourself with that agent they talk about. right? And usually they don't answer the question super well. It'll say something about communication, or they'll say something about selling their house for the most money. So, but at least gives you kind of an angle on it. And then when I close, right, I'm usually going to re-emphasize me in that position that they're looking for. Right, so if they've already outlined the agent they want, I'm going to make sure I insert myself, in my close.
You'll use the phrase, effective phrase is top agents. And we understand the top agents will say all these same things. The difference is I actually do. And what you've done then is you've recognized, here's what they're hearing from everybody else, and you've just included yourself in the group of top agents. And it's exactly what you're talking about as you go through that process, what they're looking for. And you want to say, because the reality, you won't talk to any prospect who doesn't know a ton of realtors. And they're all saying and doing the same thing. The difference is you want to be that one top mind, because you've all got relationships. Maybe it's your doctor, maybe it's an attorney, something like that. And if they had a situation where all of a sudden they need their real estate agent, and somebody said, well, gee, who should I talk to? Most of them don't have one person to send. They know realtors because you've got to put them that state of mind, that head of mind, and work it. And you go through that process, finding out what these other people are saying. You have to make the distinction between who you are and what you do as you work through it. What's your?
So when should we schedule that photography? I can get it done very quickly, or we can get it done, in the next month, but depending on that goal they lined out for you. So typically that's it. What I have done though, if I've lost a listing presentation, I have always gone back and said, it can only make me better. Please tell me what it was about this other agent, why you chose them, and how I can do that better next time. And every single time I've gotten feedback, but I've never gotten negative feedback. So that's the frustrating part, because give me something I can work with,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's just been 2 or 3 times, honestly, in 6 years, but every single time I do get a response and they say, oh, no, you did a great job. Oh, I really liked you. I just preferred this one. No. I don't know. I don't want to hurt your.
And what's your closing statement?
Well, as far as setting goals in the consultation, there's 2 questions that I want to ask like towards the beginning, whether it's a listing consultation or a buyer consultation. And I just it's a question to get to know them as people. I want to know, in the game of life and game of business, how does somebody win with you, and then how does somebody lose with you? And we have a page where it's like, 5 line items, but I mean, they might only say like 2 or 3. Like, I want somebody who's honest. I want someone who's communicates well. I don't want anybody that's pushy. And on down the line, I just let them throw them out. And then at the end, when, we're introducing them to our team, and after we've talked about all the information, I give them a pledge as to who we are as your realtor. So number 1, I want to be your fiduciary and your real estate advisor. Number 2, I want to listen to you, never rush or push you towards a certain house or certain offer, and go on down the line. And what we find is a lot of times when we're doing that pledge, it answers what wins with them and what loses with them at the very beginning. So it all kind of ties itself back in. And then at the end, it's like, is there anything else that you would expect of your realtor that we haven't talked about already? Like, no, in most cases, it's no, like, I think we really covered all that. And then that's when we go in for the close. It's like, are you ready to hire us today? Because we're ready to get going for you.
So you asked that clear statement.
Yeah, you're ready to show. Good. Are you ready to hire? We do that.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the walkaway position. We all understand the concept of something has happened or whatever going on, and you're willing to walk away. And that's an easy concept. I understand what that is. But an effective walkaway position communicates to them something about you that's really important and gives them permission to now react to you and say, wow, I really don't want you to walk away. I didn't realize this was that important and whatever. So do you find yourself, Brad, and we'll come back across, do you have a walkaway position that kind of effectively gives them permission to not have you walk away?
We've been pretty fortunate. There's only one listing consultation where we just couldn't come to an agreement. We walked away, we didn't get it. It wasn't because of any like negotiation, other than it was just, this is where we think the house should be priced, and this is where your expectation is. That's just what it came down to. It's like, I don't think we're the right realtors for you. Given everything that we've discussed, and that's okay. I mean, that's not a bad thing, but as far as like other objections, we've had the commission conversation quite a few times, but for us, it's like it's having lines or like a reason as to like what our fees are and like what our value proposition is and how we earn that. You know, the commission and all that, but I guess we've been on the forefront side. We really haven't had to walk away too many times. Now, there have been times where we've had to cancel the listing after it's been on the market, just but it's come down to what the market has changed and, you know, reasonable expectations.
Bishop?
I mean, I had to walk away based on commission. I'm very strict about that. I don't want to negotiate that. I mean, if it's a family member or a close friend, I will consider it, or a repeat client, I will consider that, you know, but only to a very small degree. I regret generally when I've done it. So I've learned over time. And I'll be honest, I probably have taken listings I should have walked away from. I hear Bob in my ear going, don't sign with crazy. And I've signed with crazy, I will tell you, I really have. And it kicked me in the tail. And remember, I'm 98% referral business. So it could be my crazy friend.
You learn a lot about your friends. Conversation.
Gosh, yes, and I knew, I mean, there was one specific one, and I had to cancel her listing, but I took termination papers to her house 3 times and left.
Yeah.
I never gave them to her because she'd tell me some, you know, sad story. I mean, it's truly, she was depressed and having issues, but she was turning down 40% of showings, and I mean, it was just crazy. It was crazy. And I knew it from the moment I signed. I knew it. I knew it. I'm telling you, Bob, you will forever haunt me. Don't tell me crazy. Don't tell me crazy. But yeah, no, it was a hard lesson to learn, but I mean, one day I'll be dead. One day I'll be dead. Oh, please don't.
Shoot higher. Yeah, Brad Owens.
Yeah, when I first got to know Dan, he would go to the front door, he'd put the sign in the door. Ring the bell, they look out and say, "Our signs look great, let's just take her to bed."
Love that thinking.
Trees supposed to sell.
Very well.
Lance, closing statement, walkaway position, you have a walkaway position?
Yeah, I mean, I think generally, if you have a very irrational person, there's not a meeting of the minds. Then it's very difficult to do work with someone. And usually, if you already have an irrational person, they're showing that in the first 30 minutes of the time you've met them. That's where the red flags come, that's the gut feeling. And I think in some situations too, you go into a listing that it needs work. The price is quite low and you have an unreasonable person, it's just not really worth. It's going to take effort. It's going to take a lot of effort and they're not going to be happy anyway. And so I think you just try to make sense of the scenario and be like, this is even worse, moving forward. So
Sometimes what we're hearing here is a walkaway position is not a way to get them to understand what's important and then agree with you. It's to let them know you're gone.
yeah,
You really are walking away, but in the interest of humanity, okay, here's why.
yeah,
I mean, nothing personal, but here's the why of it. So you need to have a good effective. You need to be prepared at least half the time. When you're walking away, they want to convince you to not.
yeah.
So you need to have made that decision. That's the reasons you're walking away, really important. Good.
Well, I mean, everything you said is good. I'll just kind of give one thing I was taught earlier in my career is that definitely walk away from somebody if you don't want to work with them because of ethics or whatever it may be. But I think most people find themselves in a situation, especially early on in their career, to work with anyone because they don't have a lot of business. And much like a broken record, if you generate enough leads and business, you have more ability to have that walk away position, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have to fall.
You can walk away easier if you're flush.
That's right. You can walk easier for flush, right? And I think that's
balance, right?
right. Listen,
Yeah.
I take some big risk on some people that were, promised me the moon if I help them out and do a huge discount, and that's why I learned my lesson.
Right, right.
Right? I was like, they promised me the moon, and then they used me for one listing and got a really good deal.
Right.
Right, and so now I've just learned from that and just understood that at the end of the day, if I had a lot of business and I had a lot of income, then I have a stronger walkaway position.
Yeah.
Because when I was younger, I didn't have it.
Yeah.
That's something I may have before that, which is great.
Yeah.
So you kind of already answered all of the question C that talks about your effective technique that causes a seller to want to work with you. You've already talked about, as you go through your presentation, you go through everything that happens that causes them to want to work with you. So I don't think we need to spend time, but I do want to go to question 2, which is your negotiating strategy to look for red flags that may affect how you negotiate and may even change your decision to accept the listing. So what kind of red flags, then what do you look for, red flags?
I wrote a couple things down here. If they're not willing to share a lot of the simple financial details or simple simple problems that I need answered. And then another one that's kind of always been a big giveaway for me anyways, is when there's more person like a significant other on the deed and they don't want me to talk to that person. Right, like husband, wife, or significant other. And I always will close because I've also learned that lesson that although one person likes you doesn't mean they both like you. So the other person doesn't like you. And then you get a call and they went with somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely.
That'd be the biggest red flag if they don't want to meet or at least have a conversation with both people that are on the deed.
One of our challenges is sometimes where you think you're a pink flag and really a red flag. And as you watch those red flags accumulate, you need to make a good decision. Right?
If I hear them talking about other lawsuits or legal action.
Favorite hobby is modeling.
That's a pretty big red flag for me, yeah. And every now and again, people just throw it out there and they start talking about their previous realtors. That's an interesting one too.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't think I'm any better than your previous realtor. I think I'm gonna exit while I can. So I think that's probably that type of speak that's just highly overly aggressive for them.
I haven't encountered either one of those, but those would be on my list if I had. I think somebody who appears to be very inflexible, if they feel like they know more than you do, it's not going to be a good marriage for me personally. I always use the word team. I would like to be your teammate. I would like to help lead your team. If I don't feel like they want a team, they want to be in control of it, then that's really not for me because I don't want to be in control. I need to have the freedom for you to trust me as your resource, or it's not gonna work.
Brad?
Trying to think what else I can add that already hasn't been said. Going from past experience, if they want to, if you're having a consultation and they're, already calling the shots. You're saying like, this is what, we think strategy should, is, or, how we operate. It's like, no, I don't want to work that way. Then, that's already gonna be tough. I've had that come up before. Just personality, it's gotta be a good fit. If they're already giving you objections or, not flexible at the very beginning, it's only gonna get stronger as you're talking about their money. And any negotiation moving forward, so.
I think part of we didn't really actually say it, but when they have a complete lack of respect for your position, your role, and who you are.
Right.
I think that's already set off on a really. But so sometimes there's a certain viewpoint out there that a realtor is this, and you're going to work for me, and this is how you're going to do it. And there's start kind of pointing in that direction. You're like, I don't think it's going to work very well. We're pretty flexible. We can make a lot of things happen on the marketing side. If they have very specific requests, but it's when their general demeanor is disrespectful. It's very difficult.
The time you spend with a jerk, you don't have time to get to the person down the road who wants to work with you.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
So don't waste time with that jerk. Now, what about changes in the listing agreement? Because I see that. Frankly, I've seen it from all of you. Well, at one time, yes. I'm on your team and send a listing agreement to me, and the seller or the seller's attorney or the seller was an attorney has changed some of the terms in the listing agreement. Now, depending on what they've changed, that could be not acceptable, but it could be a red flag.
Yeah.
And what's ironic is that most of the time, the changes don't affect us at all. And it's really more against them and they don't understand it. Sure. They're trying to, I got to do this, whatever. But those are red flags. And you all talked about this sets up that beginning of the relationship. And is it from here, is it going to go downhill from that? And sometimes that can be a big red flag. And it's part of that, how they treat you, the terms, or that's reflecting on what they decide to do with that listing agreement.
So the biggest ones I've really seen are exclusions of iBuyers or deals they've put together prior to, and they want to test the market, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Sure, if we don't sell your house, you can sell to X and you
Yeah,
don't get paid. Okay,
yeah.
sure.
The big clause that we can never accept is the indemnity clause in the listing agreement. We cannot accept that because that essentially says if the seller screws up, we're liable.
Yeah.
I don't think so. Not gonna work through that. Okay, excellent. Good job. Now, any questions before we go to the buyer client negotiation? We're ready to move on to that. Next page. Second, the negotiation with that prospective buyer client. To understand, working with a buyer is a much looser situation. Seller, here's the piece of property. It's right here.
Looser, that's a good term.
Buyer, it's all over the place. So you've got a whole different situation. Much more open-ended type of thing. So in the preparation phase of working with, this is the buyer you're going to meet with in any all kind of different situations. What's the information you need to negotiate with the buyer to decide if you're going to take this buyer on as a client? What do you got? And
It's very similar to the seller. You need the where, when, why as well, their motivation. And then I think even further, you dive into the financial piece here and truly understand that. So you can do.
how do you know what house to show if you don't know how much money? Is that simple, basic?
Yeah, in short. But just their financial plan, I was just talking to a lot of my agents. This is where some of the younger agents on my team struggle with a little bit, and I'm coaching them through it. But just understanding the financial, the mortgage hacks, all the different financial plans out there, down payment assistance to, I do have a lender that can do 1.5 million, 5% down mortgage, no mortgage insurance, 5.5%. Right?
He keeps pushing this $1.5 million deal.
Well, I'm just giving an example. That's out there.
It's out there.
And much like, Nighthawk, if you don't have the right arrow,
Yeah,
you can't solve the problem
sure.
because a lot of clients.
Go back to the arrow and
Yeah.
not hugging.
Well, I'm just saying, I think you have to be armed in today's world with more
Oh, you
financial.
have to know all the possibilities.
You don't need to be a lender. I'm not saying that.
Absolutely not.
But you need to understand what is out there for the clients, because I promise you, they will find out if you don't.
Yeah.
Right? They're gonna be researching a lot more than you. And you look into
What do you
home partners to homework.
preparation for the taking on a buyer's client?
I think motivation and time frame are really important for buyers, because then you start putting someone in your car or even they're following you. It takes a lot of time. In
Very labor intensive, isn't it?
for a buyer, yes, I think there's a lot of testing on that buyer's true motivation and following through it. If they're not pre-approved, like you said, if they're not truly ready to go, then there's some pretty disappointing moments that happen. And I've had pretty much every one of them happen to me, I think. So I learned a lot through negative experiences. So I think that's a big part of it. Understanding why they want to purchase too. And if everything doesn't completely line up, sometimes people they want to buy a home, but they really want to go look at some homes and they want to decide if they want to buy one. And then you find out they actually couldn't buy one anyway. So I think that's more important up front. And then a buyer you have to spend a lot more time with. So to me, I could probably spend a little more time with the seller that I just truly am not exactly that person. We could probably connect a little better than if I have to spend a tremendous amount of time with a buyer, like physically present, showing properties. So I think there
Needs to be a good experience.
It needs to be a better match, because man, I've had some pretty miserable months just working, you work with 5 clients and one of them is just so miserable to work with, your month stinks. It just stinks. It's not fun anymore. So I think maybe I've gotten a little more resistant to that type of person. And I think the team gets to kind of make their selections too. We try to match personalities up on the buy side, because I think that's really, really important. So.
When you're working with a buyer and you're getting all this information in preparation, just had to work with them and deal with all that. Because you're negotiating to decide if you're even going to take that buyer on as a client, work through the process. How much do you think about? Obviously, before they get in your car and go out and do it, you're going to be qualified and all those types of things. I like, it's really interesting thought about, because of the close proximity work, that it needs to be someone that you feel a little bit better about, good experience and all those types of things. And I presume you go through the forewarn and check on them as you work through that. Is there anything in this, as you pull all that information together, that's gonna be more important than we saw it in the seller side of making a quicker decision on whether or not you're gonna really be able to move forward with this fire.
I mean, the other piece is market fit, like, you know, if they're not gonna come around, let's say they wanna have an acreage property in Plano and their budget's $600,000, right?
Right.
You've got to kind of get really clear on what is available, and if someone's not willing to, you know, like, well, we'll wait for it, or when we see it, we'll know, or that kind of buyer. I think the better you can set expectations with the buyer and set that plan up, the more success you're all gonna have. But every now and again, you kind of deflect somebody because they're just unrealistic about the market. And no matter how many times you show them the available options and where they're not, you know, based on what their search is, if they're unwilling to kind of deviate from that, I just don't think you can help them. If you can't help them, they're gonna have a bad experience with you anyway.
Yeah.
So.
So, have any of you heard buyers who are hesitating because the crash is coming?
Yeah.
This is where there's a good people that they haven't.
No, I just had one tell me today, well, now that we know the recession's not coming, and I thought,
Well, that's good news.
I'm not a financial advisor, so I shouldn't say. She's like, yeah, so we're feeling really good, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Potentially, what do you need to from a buyer? Everything.
Lance touched on it, Denton touched on it, everything. I mean, I do the background check, y'all know, I'm I'm doing that on everybody for sure. But
It's all you, by the way.
yes, personality is huge, but I mean, their pre-qual, I will, obviously, in my younger days, I would step out and trust people, and boy, did I ever get burned. And so those days are over. And then creating those expectations, I think that is one of the hardest things, because so many people have this pie in the sky idea of what they can afford. And yeah, I want a $600,000 house, but I want to pay $2,000 a month. And, you know, and that's where I have to go. I need you to go ahead and talk to the lender, then we'll reconvene after you've talked to them. Then we'll really look at what your budget is going to buy you. But I mean, I hate to say lastly, their personality is a big factor, because really it's being the most important. I typically don't have people riding around with me, just the safety thing. And the longer I'm in this job, the less I like people. No, I'm very selective on who gets to ride in my car, you know, because if it's, because that discussion after you've gone into into a home and showed to them is very important. They need to have that conversation with their spouse, right? Not necessarily me. If it's just a single person, I mean, I have done it, women, I don't think I've ever been alone in a car with a man client ever, but yeah, that matters. Personality totally matters. And their ability to be flexible and go with the flow matters as well.
Janet, you have a point?
Well, just from a safety standpoint,
Yeah.
we as the women definitely have to think of these things, but the guys too. If you don't know this person whatsoever,
Right.
you meet them here at the office. And you get a copy of their driver's license.
Right.
And you take someone with you to go show those homes. It's okay to ask another agent, hey, can you go with me for the afternoon? I'll take you to Sonic afterwards or whatever. But I've had a couple of the newer agents, didn't know who they were gonna go meet, and I said,
Yeah.
no, that happens here at the office or at other KW offices. You can use other KW offices. For example, I go out to Rockwall sometimes. You can call ahead and say, I'm gonna be meeting a buyer for the first time. May I use one of your conference rooms? Don't meet them at a property for the first time.
Exactly.
Just
Good
leave it.
point.
I have a point and a question. As far as the liability for our errors and omissions and taking somebody in the car, you have stated.
No, we don't have any personal injury under our E&O. That's all in your auto insurance.
Yeah, but-
That's why we require you to have those liability numbers.
Yeah. But you've urged us, don't do that.
Yeah, but you know what? The liability expands. Once you're in your business mode, even if you're driving, they're following you and meeting, they have an accident, we've got liability. I mean, that's just things happen, but our E&O won't get involved in the personal injury part of that.
Okay.
But the other, and we just had this happen recently, where the question was asked because the couple wanted to, needed our agent to drive them in her car because their car was in the shop. And they had a baby that they needed to be, you know, so. of course,
While they were driving, the baby came out.
So that hurt the issue. But if you're taking, because their car's in the shop and you make the business decision to drive them, and let them ride with you. But if they've got a baby, you know, literally a baby, and they bring obviously seat, car seat and all like that. Is that an additional level of liability? And yes, it is. And our recommendation would be, we don't want to do that. Because if anything happened and that baby was injured, it would be on the front page of Dallas Morning News. I mean, it just would be, you know, these realtors kill the baby. So there are those types of things that we need to constantly deal with and work through. Because, you know, it's just, so knowing what they need as you work through. I mean, I remember in the good old days, when we interviewed prospective agents, we saw what kind of car they had to have, because they were going to drive around and the people were riding their car. And that was just the norm.
Yeah.
I mean, as we shifted now where people don't ride in your car, that's just a whole different, that's the custom, that's how things are. As you go
But you do have to be flexible too, to say that I don't let anybody, that's a gross misstatement, because I have a lot of reload people. I've got a couple of really great streams of referrals from people in New Jersey, and then some doctors here. And I've had to pick them up and take them out
Sure.
before. And so, I mean,
There are times where you do it.
there are times when you do it. There definitely are. And I was trying to think, one of them came in with a baby. And I think I had to put that baby in my car. I had to, yeah,
Did you have a car seat?
they had it with them.
They had it with them.
Yeah, no, they had it with them for sure, but I did ask that question because I was paranoid, you know, I mean, I think about 10 different ways.
It's not a small matter. I mean, something,
No, it's a big
at least you
deal.
got to think about it.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
So what do you say?
Well, you've got to make a decision based on a lot of factors.
I blame insurance as the.
I think you should drive.
Brad, those part on this question.
As far as like, what do I need to know from the buyer? One, I want to know what their motivation is. Two, I want to set in a consultation, like what are their expectations and where they want to be? Have they been pre-approved? Have they talked to the lender about, can they afford what they're pre-approved for? Because I've had this before. Someone was approved for 500. I got them under contract for 490. And during the option period, oh my God, I can't afford this. Like, I can't even take my wife out for a hamburger. They terminated. Like,
Oh, my God.
you know, all over hamburger. Well, no, but it's like, all they were focused on was like, and it was, part of it was on me and not really talking to the lender, but like, I got them what they said they wanted. I got them under their budget, and then they realized, oh crap, I can't afford this.
Right.
So make sure, talk to the lender.
Yes.
Yeah, the lender is just as much a member of your team as you are, or like your admin or whoever else is, because I've also had this happen before where I haven't had a conversation with the lender. I don't know what terms or interest rate or whatever they're locked into, and they found a house on Sunday and the offer deadline's at 5. How many people are answering their phone at 3:30 on a Sunday? Not very many, especially if they're in like Kansas, you know? So you want to know what their strategy is and what's the best place, what loan program are they under? Because that's going to dictate whether you, in a multiple offer situation, can you offer? Is it worth offering? Are you going to be competitive, or how do you stand out with everybody else? And then I want to know, you know, where do they want to be? Do they want to be in Allen or Mansfield? You know, I mean, it's like, I want, and the buyers that say, I want a deal, you know, like in DFW, here's my budget. I want a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, anywhere in DFW. Yeah, I don't operate that way. No, we got to be a little bit more, well, not just that, but even like buyers that like, they see DFW on a map and they see DFW is this big. But no, it's not that far. It's like Burleson's an hour away on a good day.
Yeah.
You know, so just setting clear expectations, and then I like doing buyer consultations on Zoom. Because then you can open up Netris and you can share the screen, you can show them on the map, like, okay, so where's your office? How far of a commute do you want? Do you use the commuter tool on Netris?
Yes.
It's not exact science, but it gives you a rough estimate of where you want to be.
Exactly.
Like, or, you know, there's so many different boundaries and parameters you can set. It's like, okay, here's how many based on your budget and all the things that we talked about. here are your options right here. Where do we need to adjust? Or is this what you want and where, I'd rather start out a little bit big and then narrow it down as we go along. But also, you know, as far as like what you said about time, buyers take a lot of time.
Yes.
And some can take a lot of time. Like I had one last year that said, we met him in the office and he's like, you know, I really don't think I'm gonna be buying this year because I'm just waiting for the rates to go back down. And surely they'll go back down. Okay, when I was in July of last year. And as rates were going up, and then he called me a month and a half ago and he said, yeah, I've come to the conclusion rates are just gonna be what they are. And I got him under contract last weekend.
Wow, exactly.
So, you know, still keep in touch with them, but it's like, I told you they weren't gonna go down. But, you know, just set the clear expectations, because like buyers do take time, so know what your numbers are for your team or what your history is, like how many showings does it take before you write an offer? Like the average number, what is the average agent? So it's like 8 houses before submitting an offer. I mean, ours is like 5 or whatever it is, you know, and that shows them like the questions that you ask up front, there's a method behind my madness. I'm helping you like streamline your search. So we can save you time and get.
Think about the concept. If you sat down with the buyer, I was speaking here in the office. They said, the buyer says to you, I need for you to pay us $500 cash right now in order to represent us. If the buyer said, I need for you to pay us upfront money for you to be able to represent us. Now, if they did that, I mean, that'd be a big red flag. But the reality is that's exactly what happens. You take a buyer on, they just are costing you $500 worth of time, energy, money from you to represent that buyer. You just say, well, if they had said that to me, would I have done it? You're kind of making that decision. Now, to just open up to the group, similar to the seller question, if there's a relationship with a buyer, how does that change what you're going through the process and everything? Of getting information from the buyer as you're preparing it all. Does that change anything like in the seller situation? It didn't really change. You still made your listing presentation, went through the process. What's gonna, if there's a relationship with the buyer, how's that gonna impact on how you move forward in your?
I don't know, in my experience, I feel like with friends and family, you have to be even more concise and more informative with your information, because you're gonna see a different side of your friends and family.
You're gonna assume you're gonna give them a deal because of relationship.
No, not just that, but it's like, you can't get lost in the relationship necessarily. Like, you still have to be precise, because you don't want to ruin that relationship. But also, it's like, it's not like a consultation's not like, hey, how are you? Okay, yeah, we're gonna find your house, you're ready to get going.
Right.
It's like, no, you still have, I find, at least in my experience with friends, I have to be even more on point to explain to them what the process is and how, probably more importantly, how we operate. Or who we are and how, you know, you can be friends, but also like, this is how I operate as your realtor. So just be very precise about that, set expectations up front.
Okay, any other thoughts on that? Have you ever relationship with a buyer? Is it gonna change anything?
Can ride my car.
You know somebody, you're a little more comfortable with the safety end of it. Sure.
No, but I think, like you said, it's even more important to define expectations and make sure we're on the same page. Because you don't want that getting blurry, like we're just hanging out, we're looking at houses. No, that's different. I'm working and, you know, we're playing. There's a difference.
Not thought club yet.
Right.
So we're everybody agree with that. Okay. Now, we've already effectively talked about the planning side of this and dealing with those 2 questions as you guys plan to work through it. Getting into the purpose, question 1 and the purpose. Is the purpose of representing a buyer solely to find them real estate to buy? Is that your sole purpose in representing a buyer?
No.
Somebody give me an idea of what additional things there are besides just finding that buyer, the real estate you want to buy. What else are you looking at? When we talked about the seller in a relationship, do what?
I said, getting
You
through
want to get through the
successful.
contract, go through that process.
successful.
Yeah.
I think you want to remain friends or in a relationship afterwards,
Right.
after they purchase. And I mean, honestly, when you're working with a buyer too, I mean, they could buy investment properties later on. They're going to sell that property at some
Right.
point. So you're looking
So
for.
they're a great source of future business, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. You want to make sure you get them a good deal at the front. And you know, whatever the motivation is in the end, like, but, you know, help them realize that real estate is wealth.
Right.
You can help build your wealth through that, like, you don't wanna, that's why you go over like your comps with them, at least. That's how we go over comps before writing an offer. To look at like, here's what's going on, like. You know, if you bid high, you know, this is where like a risk could be coming or could come into play, so just be transparent with them, but at the end, you want them to get a good deal. They'll build that relationship for the future.
Because this, in many cases, that buyer relationship is going to be a better long-term relationship than the seller, because often the sellers, they're gone. The buyer is here. So that's going to be a great source of future business. So big goal is not just find a piece of real estate, but find them the right piece of real estate, the right terms. So you establish that relationship and they'll feel better because you did a good job for them. They feel better about referring their boss to you because you're going to do a good job for them.
Yeah, buyers also, there's a more of an emotional high for buyers. They're in a good mood. They're having
Right,
fun. It's
right.
enjoyable, right? So generally a buyer is a better source, a lot of times a better source of referrals from that way while they're going through the process and having a good time.
Yeah.
A seller's never overly happy.
Right.
Maybe the last couple of
Last
years, you can make some
couple
arguments, yeah, but. So I think you know, a buyer, you can leverage, you have actually more time with them to understand that person and build a better relationship, you know. And make them your walking billboard, you know, if you had a great relationship with them.
And you know you've really succeeded when they let you put your magnetic signs on the side of their car. So you kind of work through that. We've talked about these other questions under the purpose. As you go through the process, asking the questions, make sure you understand the buyer's goal. Just like you have goals to do more than just help them find a house. They're gonna have goals. You go through the qualifying process, all the things that Denton's talked about. And make sure that you can effectively represent it. On the buyer side, I think it's more important to have good, effective representation, cost effective, labor intensive, get all those types of things. Do you agree that's a more important thing on the buyer side as you work through that? Now, in dealing with the active negotiating strategy on our last page, you plan, you got a clear purpose. What's your ultimate negotiating strategy, find the right property for the buyer? First question, do you have a plan to help the buyer actually buy a property? So are you going through a process, we'll start with Brad, where you're really making sure these are buyers that they don't have that worst of all maladies where there's always one better house right around the corner. So they can't pull the trigger. So what do you do to make sure this is a buyer who's actually ready to buy a property? They're qualified them, they've got the money.
Okay.
You're gonna take them out, you're gonna meet with them, you show them houses. What's your little technique to find out this really is a buyer? This is somebody who's gonna buy a house.
I think you know it within the first couple showings, you know, if they're asking me questions or if I can go back to questions that we had in the buyer consultation of like what their motivations are. But if they're asking questions about the price or, you know, like the neighborhood, like, wow, this checks a lot of boxes for us, like. You can ask them, you know, when we're about to leave, like, are you ready to submit an offer on this one, or do we need to go see the other ones on our list? And then really building the relationship with them to see like when and where are they ready. As far as like when they're ready to submit an offer, is that what you're asking?
So as you go through the process, and this gets a little bit to the closing techniques things we talked about on the seller side. You need to be able to recognize when they're ready to buy and without making a decision for them, because they may come down to two houses that are really close.
Yeah.
And if you establish a good relationship, they can look at you and say, wow, which one do you think we ought to buy?
Mhm.
And go both.
Yeah.
Both.
Yeah, I said that before too.
So as you go through the process and you're making an evaluation on these people, are they ever going to really buy? One of our good agents, we should go nameless. Came and said, I don't know what to do here. I can't get the buyer to buy. I said, well, have you shown them how? Yeah, I've shown them 100 houses. See, that's a process you should have gone through. At some point in time, you've got to say, this is not someone who's going to buy it.
Right.
For whatever the reason is. So as you go through that process, you need to have a plan to say, here's how I'm going to determine if this person's going to buy a house or not. So as you talked about what you're evaluation, going through the process, kind of looking for the signals from them when they see houses. You're getting them, you're educating them on the market, what's there, what's available. Are you doing the kind of thing, Tisha? What do you do as you go through to
I
help?
mean, I would bring them back to if those original things that they were looking for, their wish list in that house. You know, sometimes I have people who are like, oh, I wanted to make an offer on this house and I have to bring them back and go, okay, but you said you wanted a 4-bedroom, 3-bath, and this is a 2-bedroom condo. You know, let's go back to, you know, how did that change? Why do you not want this anymore? So I think trying to bring them back to their original wish list and trying to figure that out, you know, because I have had them say, what would you do? There's both of these, which one would you do? And I would say, based on what you originally told me, based on your goals to get to Frisco by September, you wanted a house with a pool for the kids in a great school district. This one fits the bill.
Checks all the boxes.
Right. So just trying to hone them back to what brought them to you to begin with. And if you don't ask in the beginning, which I've made a mistake, as you know, I've made this mistake, not asking enough questions. But boy, have I learned. Again, really ask those questions up front so you have that information to rely on. You have that information to go back and guide them to make the right decision.
Yeah.
I haven't had anybody who like me and then never wanted to buy a house. So
So Lance, you've got a technique that you use with buyers on the absolute listing. That if it doesn't fit this, then they don't even see it. So you
Yeah.
have that process.
Yeah, in Pro, we do, so we have, so just like you said, you know, original motivation of what they want. And so if they're sending, you know, sometimes people get a little Zillow happy, they start sending you properties, like, look at this, look at this, you know, it's blinging them out. And so you have to go back, like you said, to something that they originally said. And so if that doesn't fit, but the other thing, I don't show a lot of properties anymore, but thing I really like to do is a rating system. So we would go look at 3 properties. And each time, they knew this in advance because I would set the stage for this, but I said, well, when we leave each home, I'm gonna ask you on a scale of 1 to 10, you know, what do you rate the property? We buy houses that are 7 and higher. And so we're setting that expectation. So when they come in, you ask the husband and the wife this, so when you come out and they both have an 8 or a 9, they know the next question was, what would you like to offer? So it's the assumptive close, but we're setting an expectation that we're not just gonna look at houses to look at houses. Each time we're gonna have a rating. And then if they give me a 6, I'm gonna say, what would make it a 10 for you? So I'm understanding what that house is missing, right? So that if I gotta go show another round of 3 houses, I'm not gonna make that same mistake. So I think it's important to have some type of system that, you know, everybody's on board with, and it's actually becomes a fun game that everybody gets involved with too.
A lot of interaction.
Yeah, buying a house is a process of elimination just as much as finding the right one. So making sure that we're constantly realigning, and every now and again, you'll have one spouse say something that throws you off. I rate this a 5 because why? And it's not something they ever shared in their original criteria. And you're like, oh, wow, that's good to know. So, yeah. Now you put it in, now we realize.
No, that's all great. I think the way we approach it, Jeff Jacobs told me earlier in my career when I was learning from him that after 4 houses, they don't make an offer, there's something wrong. Like, okay, tell me, let me understand that, because I'd love to learn that. So I kind of think of it like a first down, 4 plays to get a first down. And so after if you set the table correctly and get all the wants, needs, and understand what you're still not going to get all of them, just like they said, after the 4 houses, I think a lot of people, including myself, would just go home or go to the next showing or next appointment or whatever, but wouldn't actually have a conversation like football players do today. As soon as they don't get the first down, what do you see them doing? They're sitting on the sideline looking at film of the 4 plays. So we need to sit down, Bob, not sit down, but hey, okay, obviously these 4 didn't work today. Let's talk about that. Now, how do I frame that? I use what's called the buyer's triangle, which I learned, I think, from Anna Kruger. So the buyer's triangle simply helps them understand their wants and needs. The top of the triangle is their price, which is usually fixed in most cases. I mean, give or take a little bit. The bottom left is condition and the bottom right is location. And I painted the picture prior to ever meeting with them that they cannot have all 3. So it's going to be a tug of war between all 3. And since price is fixed, you're going to either have to give up on location or give up on condition. So would you rather go further north, for example, to up 75 and get a newer home, but be further away from work? Or would you rather be close to work and have an older home that you may have to fix up? Right? So, and that's the battle that happens between sometimes significant others. And they have to choose which one is more important. And based on those 4 that we looked at, I will start determining that location, because they will say, well, I want to be 50 minutes to work. Right? And then all of a sudden, they're looking at a home 30 minutes away, and I'll say, great, that's 30 minutes away. Is that okay with us? Yeah, it actually matches more of what we want. So, okay, great. So the condition sounds like it might be more important than the location. Yeah, I guess it is. I guess we really want that newer kitchen, the double oven, the pool and all that stuff. And if we get a pool, we're in. So great, let's go look at that. And then I'll go back and expand out their search, or tell my agents to expand out their search and have that conversation. Right? And it brings them back to price, condition, location. And it makes it a lot easier, as they said, you choose through process elimination. So we start eliminating houses. Right?
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yep.
Right.
And so throw a question that's not technically, I hear with this concept. That is, you're making your decision, showing them houses, and even given the nature of the market. There are a lot of houses in somebody's profile that could fit. So how important is it that they have confidence that when you decide, here are the 4, here are the 10 houses you're going to show them, that these are the 4 best houses in the market? You don't have to look at 50 houses. You have to trust me. They have to have confidence in your knowledge of the market, what's going on. How big a deal is that for them?
So I'll give you a story. I don't think you should see more than 4 or 6 houses, because I think you get buyer fatigue. Especially for them, everything starts folding together.
Yeah.
So I always tell them, pick your best 4, I'll stretch to 6. As far as if there were 50 properties to look at.
Right.
And this is a true story. Whenever I helped Lindsay and Austin buy their house, there were 55 homes available in Frisco. I only showed them like 12 because we had to make 2 offers. But I had them drive every single neighborhood and said, if you don't like the neighborhood, you're not gonna like living there. So drive the area. If you like it, then we'll go look. If you don't like it, then we'll just mark it off and keep looking. Right?
So you showed 12?
I think it was 12, maybe less.
Out of state buyers, really, driving tour is the best way to eliminate your showings, because a lot of times you're not going to look at a house, you're going to feel out the neighborhood and the feel of everything. They don't need you there to do that.
Same thing with the reload plan.
But they need your assistance to guide, right?
And I tell them to go between 5 and 7.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can see what your neighbors look like,
Yeah.
you know.
But the reality is too, they have a different conversation together as a couple a lot of times, assuming it's, a couple, than they do with you too. So this gives you an opportunity to really even kind of dream a little bit, discuss what is important to the family. You don't need to be there for all that conversation, right? That's a couple
Just need
conversations.
the result of it.
That's right. They need the result, then you're directed, right? Now you've eliminated several neighborhoods and you're directed on their vision draw line, hopefully at that point, so.
I think with out-of-state buyers, especially if they're staying at a hotel, like you'll go show them like Saturday or Sunday, show them a couple houses. Especially like that first weekend, if they're just new to the area, haven't seen Frisco for the first time ever. Show them a couple houses or have them go to an open house, and then I have them drive like from the hotel to wherever their office is, like make sure your homework is on Monday morning, you're on the tollway at 7:30 in the morning. Or you're on, this way, figure out a way to work that's gonna work best for you, and then if you can take another 15 minutes or whatever, then we can maybe look up in like Prosper or McKinney or something like that. But as far as like out-of-state buyers or even reload buyers, I think it's better if they have their own vehicle, because they're not gonna,
Right.
when they first meet you, they're not gonna tell you everything, but they're gonna talk about what their needs are. And how they feel about a property, like amongst themselves, and then it's like, okay, so what are we still thinking about that first house when we get to the next one? Or what are you thinking about the Prosper area, like Winsong Ranch, or something like that? And then as you go along, try to match up, like, okay, they seem to like this, but it's out of their price point, but what's another neighborhood that could be really good, like Allianz, for example, just because it's basically right across 380. And just try to match, use your expertise on the areas that you know and try to match where they say they want to be.
Out of state's probably the most important. You should have a good process for that. I mean, imagine if you fly to Denver, if you just go to Denver, you kind of lack awareness and perspective about how the city's laid out. So the best thing you can do is show how an area is laid out, show what each area is iconic for and known for, and then allow them the flexibility to go drive some of the key neighborhoods in that area. And I'm telling you, that's probably half the time we spend with our clients, is them figuring out that awareness and perspective, and then they kind of get zoned in. Or if they have a really close friend that lives in a certain neighborhood, go hang out in that neighborhood, right? If they already have kind of waypoints or anything that they already kind of have awareness about, having them go fill it out, because a lot of times wasted when we're just going and just experiencing their learning with it, and I don't think that's completely necessary. It's not a great time.
Great, thank you, Jeff.
I would say the last piece, because I think you said, how do you know if a buyer's ready? I I was taught this question by Tony Cello. I always ask if it's, you kind of know when they don't want the house, but there's a few times where they're kind of middle, they're not sure. And I'll simply ask them, hey, if I were to call you tomorrow and say this home's off the market, how does that make you feel? And if they're like, I would die. Great, then let's go ahead and do the write an offer. There's ways out of it. But if we don't write that offer, you're gonna deeply regret it. And then we'll write the offer. And if they go,
No big deal.
crumble up, throw it in the trash, let's move on.
Well, good. So lots of concepts here. Everybody unique experiences. Anything you need to add to what we've already talked about? That you say, wow, I thought we were gonna talk about this too. You think, because this is very complete. I mean, and the thing that was great about this is each one of them, while there's a common element, has a unique perspective and a unique experience of how they do things. As we get ready to wrap up, any final questions from the group, including our Zoomers, that you say, you know, what does he or she think about this? Anything that you want to ask?
One thing that I would add,
Okay,
maybe not so much as a question, but when I work with both the listing and the sales side, we talk about buyers agents, you know, talking to the lender, vetting them, asking the questions, are they self-employed, are they W-2, are we looking at bank statement, all of the things, but also as a listing agent, it's really important for you to let that seller know that you also are keeping your thumb on the lending side, because no seller wants to take their property off the market, go through repairs, do all of the things just to find out that the buyer really doesn't qualify. So when I'm working on the seller side, I'm annoying, especially as we get closer and I'm getting crickets or no
you see him
communication.
just nod his head when you said that?
In the best possible way ever.
I can be a very good squeaky wheel, as I've said many times, because it's also your due diligence as a listing agent, not just relying on what the buyer's agent is telling you. You can hear it from them. We are allowed to ask questions of that lender, even though we're on the sales side or the list side.
Perfect. Okay, anything else before we wrap up? I do want to let you know that next Wednesday, we're going to have another negotiation panel, different group. We'll talk about that in a second, but they're going to talk about the negotiation you do in the transaction, represent seller and buyer into a contract. So we're going to talk about dealing with that. Do you feel like this has been really an effective way to deal with that subject? Being here the whole time, we appreciate that. Thank you, sir. Great, and everybody go out and have another great day. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah.
Good job.
There's rosin, there's scratch, there's all. Yep.
So.